Hello everyone, it's me again, Paul, your wellness companion. This is the last episode of Inner Voice, how introspection can improve interpersonal communication. For the final episode, I'm going to talk to you about a couple of scenarios. Next, I'll analyze them using values, Johari window, and ABC model, and come up with possible solutions to the sample problems. In the first episode, I talked about values and their attributes. Next, I discussed Johari window in the second episode. In my third episode, I talked about the ABC model or ABC cycle. For this last one, I'm going to revisit some experiences I had with friends who were going through some problems. We were in high school at the time, and I tried to help them, but I didn't know the right words to say or skills to help them with. I had a friend who was extremely good in school. Not only was he straight A, but he was also a member of a lot of clubs and played different sports. Between all his commitments, he started to neglect some classes, and it showed. One day, he got a C in an exam that he barely had time to study for. Some possible values to discuss are personal achievement, excellence, and academic performance. Moving on to Johari window, it was evident being a top student is front and center. The guy was a GOAT from elementary up to our sophomore year. This is the open area. What other people didn't tell him, and that included me, and he couldn't see for himself, was that he was very hard on himself. He was very critical. In some examples, he would go after extra credit projects when he didn't really need them, and even though they conflicted with other timelines. This was his blind spot. Hiding behind his facade was that he didn't want to be perceived as incapable or inadequate. It wasn't until after so many years that I found this out from his sister. He just didn't want to disappoint people. Part of the unknown is how eventually, when he continued in that path, he was suffering from mental health issues like anxiety and depression. We were in AP Bio, and he got a C- on an exam. This ruined him. Despite all his other previous successes, he focused on this one event. One consequence that I know of was that he just gave up and stopped being who he was. He became less active in school and just did the bare minimum to get by. If I knew then what I know now, I would go through this with lessons with him and ask, do his values come from other people, like parents, siblings, or other family members? Values can come from different sources. Does the value stem from another value, such as recognition or external validation? Values can change priorities based on need. I would help him list his accomplishments and achievements and how his hard work, intelligence, and talents are all attributed to him, not his failure. Using Johari window, I would also reveal his blind spot and tell him that even before this exam, he had been very unnecessarily hard on himself. I would talk to him all the instances when he pushed himself so hard, like taking on so many volunteer projects from teachers for extra credit, even though he didn't need them. I would also encourage him to let out his frustrations, maybe in writing or other means of safe expressions. Open up the facade into further discussion. Maybe in doing so, he could work on listing them down, list down his priorities, and just learn to say no to others. This way, he would not have gotten burned out. For the ABC cycle, I would help him separate himself from this event by talking about his previous accomplishments and that how this failure does not or did not identify him. And instead of using a mantra of failure, maybe talk about how he can do better instead. In this second scenario, I had a friend who wanted to be a mechanic because she loved cars and engines. I'm just using machinist as an example. She was from a second generation of immigrant family. She was the oldest, and her parents had high hopes that she would take on a prestigious career because of how they interpreted her skills. So the values in conflict are herself, her independence, creativity, and authenticity. And her family valued tradition and success. For the Johari window analysis, here's what I have. She was extremely talented and good at what she did, and her family acknowledged that. But for her blind spot, unfortunately for her family assumed that because of her talents, she was naturally gifted to be an architect. She was always into building, creating, and putting together parts. She wanted to be a machinist, but because her family was often upselling the architect career, she thought that being an architect is what they wanted her to be. Unknown to either party is that each side had assumptions, but not concrete communication. The parents were supportive of what they thought was her career goal. She was under the impression that because all they did was talk about it, that's what they wanted her. For the activating event, one time during a traditional family celebration with other relatives, her parents bragged about her for all the relatives to see. Because now that it was a family official, she believed that she was stuck with the path that her parents broadcasted. She believed she couldn't disappoint them. Just like the previous scenario, she was experiencing issues with confirmation bias, that she could only do what her parents told her to do, and she was going through some mental health issues as well. For a discussion on values, I would have talked to her about the importance of her values. Some values are two-sided of the same coin. For this instance, each of them had different ideas on what success would look like. But the underlying value is still success. Some values conflict with each other. It may not have had to be a battle of wills, but maybe a sharing of perspective. Which leads me to Johari window. I would have talked to her and asked if she has talked to other people in her family. There would have been varying degrees of opinions that could have helped her find someone who could have been an advocate for her. Sometimes trust requires proof. In facade, what she didn't show them remained unseen or became assumptions. What fruits of her labor could she have shown that highlighted her passion? Maybe she could have shown them how she built a machine from scratch and how a company bought it for a large sum of money. Just like in a previous scenario, for ABC cycle, I would tell her to create a degree of separation or buffer between the activating event and her identity. What I mean by buffer is that to keep her identity intact, who she was versus who her parents thought she was. Instead of bottling in her assumptions, I would have asked her to talk to someone in the family as a litmus test. I will also talk to her about exploring ways on how to bring up the conversation in different settings. Some of you might be going through the same issues my friends were going through. Or maybe you know someone who is going through similar situations and you'd like to know how to help them. I hope that by talking about values, Johari window, and ABC cycle, I was able to enlighten you on different ways self-reflection and introspection can help with our relationships with other people. By understanding yourself more, you gain a level of control on how you feel, think, behave, and interact with other people. Maybe next time you face a difficult adversity with an event or other individuals, you can analyze the situation using what you learned from these past 4 lessons. Thank you for joining me on this short journey. I hope you thrive and wish you well.